Welcome to UFC Breakdown. On the 16th of July, the Octagon makes its return to Scotland for UFC Fight Night Glasgow. In the headline attraction, fan favourite Gunnar Nelson looks to continue his ascension up the welterweight rankings as he takes on lethal Argentinian striker Santiago Ponzinibbio. We're going to be paying close attention to that main event and a whole lot more. Here's what's coming up on today's show. We'll see how the slick submission style of Gunnar Nelson matches up with the devastating stand-up game of Ponzinibbio in Fight Focus. Scottish MMA's First Lady Joanne Calderwood will once again go to war on home soil when she takes on Cynthia Calvillo in the co-main event. We'll discuss this intriguing strawweight matchup, and Dan goes on the mat to display their key techniques. Fellow Scottish warriors Stevie Ray and Paul Craig will also make the walk on Fight Night in front of their passionate home crowd. We head to Scotland for exclusive access into Ray's training camp. And Paul Craig joins us from his camp in Sweden ahead of his huge homecoming fight. So welcome to The Seats, and I'm joined by the usual suspects, Nick Peet, MMA journalist, good to have you back, and of course the one and only Dan Hardy. So gentlemen, we're back in Glasgow for number 2. Were you there at Bisping latest?
I was, yeah, and it's almost 2 years exactly to the day that we were last in Glasgow, and the atmosphere that night was unbelievable.
It really was.
And none more so than when the local fighters came out to fight. We've got obviously 3 on this card, on the main card at least, this time around, so I'm expecting fireworks all over again.
Yeah, 4 Scots on the card. Dan, the prelims then, let's take a look and see which ones you're really looking forward to.
Well, the 2 that jump out immediately, obviously Neil Series' retirement fight. Really excited to see him come back and get that last opportunity to get a win in the Octagon. I mean, he's really earned it. You know, he's a real fan favourite. His fighting style, everybody loves it. And the other one, you know, somebody at the other end of their UFC career, Brett Johns, who just looks like he's going to go from strength to strength in this division. He's already fighting like a mature fighter, even though he's right at the beginning of his career. So, you know, 2 really fun prelims to get started with.
Main card for you, what do you like about the main card?
Well, obviously the 3 Scottish fighters all on there, but in real meaningful fights as well. Jojo fights to, you know, stay relevant in this strawweight division. You've got Stevie Ray, who's looking to build on the greatest, you know, run of his entire career, and you've got Paul Craig, who looks sensational on his debut, trying to bounce back from a defeat last time out. So that's what I know the fans are going to really be going to get behind on the night.
Yeah, and what about the main event?
It's a great main event. You know, it's a real classic grappler versus striker type main event. You've got the aggression, the power in one corner, and you've got the style and the technique and the cool, calm, collective Gunnar Nelson in the other. It's got all the ingredients to be a great fight.
Yes, and Gunnar Nelson looked fantastic in London. Excited to see what he brings to the Octagon in Glasgow. But his opponent, Santiago, is on a real hot streak. He's looking for his 5th win, and he's really knocking on the top 10 of the rankings. But he faces a stone-cold Viking who can pretty much finish the fight anywhere he wants. So on paper, this looks like a really nice piece of matchmaking. Dan, take us through the numbers.
Well, Nick, what you were saying was right. This is an excellent opportunity for Ponzinibbio to find his way into the top 10. You can see he's sitting at 14 to Gunnar Nelson's 8. So Gunnar is very much defending his place in the top 10, whereas Ponzinibbio is trying to crack that boundary. Let's have a look at this, though. All striking for Ponzinibbio, 93%, very much focused on keeping this fight standing and forcing him into a kickboxing match. Whereas Gunnar Nelson, his striking leads into the takedowns, which ultimately leads to the submissions. And that's what we see with most of Gunnar Nelson's fights. Average fight times around the same. Takedown defense and takedown accuracy, obviously, on Gunnar Nelson's side. But the strikes landed per minute is very high for Ponzinibbio, which really just reinforces what game plan he's going to be stepping in there with. He has to keep this fight on the feet. He's got excellent scrambles, and he's got good takedown defense at 60%. That is high. But ultimately, he has to keep it in that range because contending with Gunnar on the floor is not a good idea. So let's talk about Ponzinibbio's striking to start with. He's got excellent basics. There's nothing particularly special about his striking. He doesn't do anything unusual. It's the basics. He's got them down to a T, and he's very good at cutting the octagon down and keeping people right on the end of his knuckles. You can see how he's keeping that distance and picking those shots, but using the full extent of his reach. And once he's got Stoll's number, you can see he's backed up against the fence. He throws that powerful overhand right, but when he does it, watch this. He digs his toes into the canvas, and then before he releases the right hand, he throws that with all the power in his leg. but he allows his back foot to drift across. This does two things. It opens the opportunity for the drag left hook, but it also cuts the octagon down for his opponent, who will be circling that way, expecting the left hook to come. Something else that we've seen him use as well, which could be an option, in the Sean Strickland fight, we saw him throw a long right high kick. We'll see it here. It's very much a similar kind of footwork. He throws the right hand, he allows that right leg to drift up and drag across the face. And if he can get his timing right on that, it will cut down another exit for Gunnar Nelson. But when it comes to the striking, it's all about the hands. It's all about the punching power. And you'll see in his posture, when he's throwing strikes, he's driving off his legs, almost like he's ramping his body. He's driving straight from his legs and into the punch. So he's cutting down on a lot of the turning, a lot of the torque that you would need to generate power because he's driving from his base. But one thing that we see him do a lot is when somebody tries to grab him, he'll push away and drag his upper body out, which is very good for defending the underhooks. Now, if we look at the Nordine Taleb fight, this is where we see his footwork, when he couldn't control the octagon because Taleb was pushing him around. So he was able to circle back and forth using excellent lateral movement, constantly changing his angle, circling around, forcing Nordine Taleb to keep turning his angle to face him. And then on the half beat, he steps in with the 1-2, very similar to Gunnar Nelson against Brandon Thatch. He's got excellent footwork and excellent speed, and I will go out on a limb and say he's probably got the best footwork that Gunnar Nelson's faced in the octagon, which poses all kinds of challenges. Now, it would be a real injustice to divide Gunnar Nelson's game up because one technique leads into the next. He's a sequence fighter, so to focus on individual aspects of his game wouldn't really do it justice. Let's look at his UFC debut against DeMarcus Johnson. He steps in with an overhand right, he gets his hands on him and drags him to the canvas where he starts to work that oppressive top game. He irons him out till he finds a mount position, and then he starts to look for the rear naked choke. And a lot of the time, we'll find in this position, he'll rock them over to the body triangle so he can squeeze the body as well as the neck when he gets that position. And this is the same sequence that we see a lot of the time. He's got that nice snappy punch, that single shot power, which stuns his opponent. From here, he'll drag them down to the floor. You can see with Zach Cummins, it's the front headlock. Immediately circles to the back, gets the underhook, the seatbelt position, and then wraps him up and starts to threaten the rear naked choke. Now, Zach Cummins did a good job of defending here, but something else we see Gunnar Nelson using it are these wrapping punches where he uses the inside of the knuckles to the body and to the face to get the reaction that he wants out of them to open up that opportunity for the rear naked choke finish. And this sequence that he uses, because it's worked so effectively, there's no reason to really deviate from it. He just works with what his opponents give him, but he knows what he wants to do. Against Brandon Thatch again, the beautiful knockdown into a mounted position, and then just chips away at them. Look at the body triangle and watch how he squeezes simultaneously. So he torques the whole body from the neck all the way down to the midsection. You can even see his foot shaking as he's squeezing there. And against Albert Tumenov, look at this beautiful takedown and immediately covers the hips. This is how he keeps his opponents grounded. There's no rush. He's not trying to get the submission immediately. He takes care of one thing after another. Once he's grounded them, he smothers them. He stifles their resistance. And then when they start to give up, then he starts to progress his position. He takes the mount, and in this fight, he was very, very mean with this ground and pound, really slicing, smashing elbows, which again forces his opponent to give his back. He slides his hooks in almost effortlessly, and then that is a face bar with a body triangle. So there's all kinds of pressure going on to the opponent there. It's a very stifling attack, and because Gunnar Nelson's so successful at it, we very rarely see someone be able to shut it down. Ponzinibbio's got excellent takedown defense, though, and this is going to be a key in this fight because we know that Gunnar Nelson is at some point going to want to try and get his hands on him. Now, Ponzinibbio's shown excellent awareness of what he's supposed to be doing, stuff in the head, pulling his legs out and trying to keep his hips away from his opponents. Because he's got fast hands and he's got fast reaction time, he's able to put these things into play very quickly. You can see the hand on the back of the head, breaking Zach Cummins' posture, and then immediately when he's back to his feet, he attacks. Now, this was a great scramble as well, which almost ended up on his back. He almost gave his back in this position, but you can see the mistake in the replay is that Stoll didn't have the body lock, which is something that Gunnar Nelson uses a lot. So here, watch this. He actually gives his back here as he's driving up. But the mistake that Stoll makes is that he's got the overhooks. You can see the blue arm here. If that was underneath the red arm, if that was underneath Ponzinibbio's arm, that elbow wouldn't have been able to be forced to the canvas, so he wouldn't have escaped that position, which I guarantee is something Gunnar Nelson will be looking at doing. That seatbelt position will allow him a lot more control in those scrambles. But his awareness is what we've got to be looking out for, and if Gunnar Nelson tries to cover that distance recklessly, he will get caught with something. His timing against Court McGee was excellent, and you'll see this in the replay. He goes through the different stages. There's a nice stinging jab there where he parries the lead hand to the outside, but then as soon as McGee starts to pressure, he goes with the underhook, he builds a frame across the face, and that allows him to feel Court McGee dig his back foot in and pressure back into him, which allows him to throw that powerful right hand, which got him the knockdown. He's got the awareness to stop these takedowns. Doing it is another thing entirely, but then if he forces Gunnar Nelson to kickbox with him, then we don't know what's going to happen, because Gunnar Nelson's got very unpredictable and very fast striking, and we're seeing it improving every time he enters the octagon. Against Alan Jouban here, who's an excellent Thai boxer, he timed the right hand perfectly, and the thing that was astonishing is how close he was to Alan Jouban before he threw the punch, which really tells me that he was looking to land the punch to clinch him and then drag him to the floor again, which is what he did. But the punch did a lot more damage than I think he was expecting. You can see here, as he steps in, look at that. That's a 90-degree angle in the arm. That's a very close range right hand, which not only allows him to hit with power with all of his body weight moving into it, but should Alan Jouban have been backing up, he would have had an extra few inches extension on that punch, which means he would have landed it, allowed him to push him to the fence, where he gets the front headlock and drags him down for the finish. That sequence fighting that Gunnar Nelson uses can be devastating, but there are several different places which you can be halted. And if Ponzinibbio can be on his game and use the techniques that he already has in the bag, he can really slow Gunnar Nelson down.
Loving that, pulling apart all of the highlights of both fighters. Let's talk about Ponzinibbio first then. 23 career wins, 13 in the first round. And we saw in the stats as well, 93% striking rather than anything else. Kind of know what he's going to do, right?
Yeah, very much so. But the thing for me is he's beaten tricky guys as well.
First guy to stop Court McGee, I think.
Exactly. But, you know, people like Sean Strickland and Zach Cummings, these are guys that like to upset fighters. These are guys that stop momentums. And he's running over these guys. You know, I think the amount of power and explosivity he brings into the octagon, he's got to get respect off any welterweight out there. And I think, as Dan pointed out, that his takedown defence seems to be vastly improved. Moving to ATT just seems to have upped his game to another level again. So it's a tough one for Gunnar Nelson, a real tough match.
Do you think, Dan, that the really aggressive style of Ponzinibbio plays into that karate, you know, like kind of cobra-like attacks that he has? Either he can be aggressive, but on the counter, that karate style is very effective.
It will make him more vulnerable. There is a danger to that because he does need to push forward in order to land those punches aggressively. But the thing that we always talk about with Gunnar Nelson is how he's able to unnerve his opponents. He's able to make people second-guess themselves, and instead of thinking about their offensive, they're wondering what Gunnar Nelson's going to do next, which makes them hold back. My thought with Ponzinibbio is that that's going to go out the window, though, and he's not going to give Gunnar the respect that most people would show him, which means that he can push forward, he can attack aggressively, and that's a new problem that Gunnar Nelson has to solve.
Another one, Ponzinibbio never been submitted. And from what you were saying there, we're looking for Gunnar to strike, take down, and get that submission. How do you think the ground games stack up?
Well, I think part of the reason why he's never been submitted is because he's so adamant on defending the takedown. Even when he hits the ground, he's not accepting of the takedown. He posts on the head, he scrambles back to his feet, and then he immediately attacks. So it takes away that second shot opportunity for his opponent as well because they're thinking about defending themselves. So I think a lot of his submission defence is down to his takedown defence. So the question is, can Gunnar ground him and hold him down? That's really the challenge here. OK,
Nick, let's talk about the rankings then. A lot really to be gained for Ponzinibbio. What do you think a win would do for both guys?
Well, obviously, a win for Santiago means that he flies up into the top 10, and ultimately, I think it would probably knock Gunnar out of the top 10. I think it would like be a change in places scenario. I think for Gunnar, you know, once again, he's having to defend his position in the top 10 at 170 pounds. After his last performance, he told us, he said, that's it now, I want somebody above me, as we explained earlier. Everybody at welterweight's tied up at the moment. Yeah. But he's staying active. This is what Gunny's all about. He's staying active. He's fighting a guy beneath him in the rankings, someone who's hungry and trying to get his spot. But listen, if Gunny wants to crack on next year and get that title shot that he's been chasing, he's got to fend these guys off and he's got to do it well. He's got to look good doing it.
One thing that we've also got to appreciate with Mr. Nelson is he's not really in this for the honours. He's about becoming the best martial artist, the best fighter. So he sees a little bit beyond that. But more about that another time. We're going to take a quick break now, but when we come back, we preview the co-main event between Scotland's own Jojo Calderwood and the undefeated American Cynthia Calvillo. Welcome back to UFC Breakdown. Today we are previewing the upcoming event in Glasgow on July 16th. So on the night, 4 Scottish fighters will feature, including former World Muay Thai champion Joanne Calderwood. She entertains the highly touted American prospect, Cynthia Calvillo.
Joanne Jojo
So Dan, statistically, how do these women match up?
Well, this is a really fun fight between one of my favourites in Joanne Calderwood, a great Muay Thai fighter, against one of the hottest prospects in the division in Cynthia Calvillo. You can see the rankings again, 14 against 8, so a great opportunity for Calvillo to jump into the top 10 rankings. But again, their styles are very, very contrasting. Jo Calderwood, all about striking. We see the takedowns quite high, but that's predominantly to put people in a position where she can continue to hit them. Whereas Cynthia Calvillo, everything is around that submission prowess that she has. Now, if we look at the last 5 fights, Jo Calderwood's got a bit more experience, and particularly at the higher level, you can see her coming off a loss to Andrade, who's a title contender, whereas Cynthia Calvillo is unbeaten in 5 fights. Her last 2 fights been in the UFC, and both by rear naked choke, so she's all about the submission. So whether we're going to see another aspect of her game tested by a world champion Muay Thai fighter is really the question on everybody's lips at the moment.
So, Nick, 2 beloved fighters. Joanne Calderwood is much loved around Europe and, of course, in her hometown of Glasgow. But she faces Cynthia Calvillo, who's the kind of new star of the division, who's really realising her potential right now.
Yeah, very much so. You know, there's a real momentum behind it in the US especially. And one thing the stats don't show us there as well, which is worth raising, is the fact that Cynthia had her first MMA fight the same year as Joanne had her first fight. She had built up a 5-1 amateur record before she turned professional. Obviously, Jojo went straight into the pro ranks. So actually, they've got quite a similar record. She was fighting on promotions like Tough Enough, which is at a very high standard over in the US. So it's not experience against novices as it may suggest. These girls are well matched.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, actually, because I think we do see Joanne Calderwood being a mainstay in a division. But actually, Calvillo has been getting some good experience elsewhere.
Yeah.
Excellent stuff. OK, well, we're going to take a look at some of the key techniques now, courtesy of Mr. Hardy, as we go on the mat.
Joanne Calderwood v Cynthia Calvillo is a typical striker v grappler matchup. Cynthia Calvillo is a highly skilled technician on the ground, and Joanne Calderwood's a classically trained Muay Thai fighter with a lot of weapons at her disposal. One thing we see her using a lot are spinning attacks, and they're some of the most dramatic techniques we see in the octagon. The technique I want to focus on today is the spinning back fist, the one she used with great effect against Valerie Latona.
Oh! Spinning back fist for Jojo!
To set up the spinning back fist, you'll see Joanne Calderwood walking her opponent down. She likes to use long-range techniques like the teep to the midsection, as well as a stinging jab and an inside low kick. Now, once she's sold these techniques to her opponent, she can start drawing their reaction to open up that target for the spinning back fist. So here in this situation, once she's landed the teep a few times, she can feint it by lifting her knee up, which will draw the guard of her opponent, allowing her to then step heavy on that front leg and spin, landing the back fist to the open side. Spinning techniques are very devastating when they land, but they do need setting up in order to open up those targets. Due to Joanne Calderwood's aggressive style, we see her walking opponents down in the octagon, and she likes to work into her Thai boxing range where she can clinch and use devastating elbows and knees. The risk here, though, is that Cynthia Calvillo can get her hands on Jo Calderwood, and because she's such a high-level grappler, she's going to try and drag Jojo Calderwood to the mat and then circle to her back, and she can find the back from any position. A good example of this is in Calvillo's UFC debut against Amanda Cooper, where she set up the Anaconda choke, and as Amanda Cooper started to bail out of it, Cynthia was able to take the back, sink the hooks in, and get the choke.
She's losing the position, but she's taking the back. What a beautiful transition. Trying to sink that arm underneath the neck. That's it. That's a wrap.
She has excellent spatial awareness on the mat, which allows her to transition from one position to another and always find those hooks so she can threaten with the rear naked choke. And the transition is what I want to focus on today. In the Amanda Cooper fight, Cynthia Calvillo found herself in a front headlock position. She wrapped up the traditional anaconda choke and then rolled through with the intention of getting the submission, but Amanda Cooper denied it. So my partner Terry's going to do the same thing. He's going to bridge back into me, which is going to force me to transition to the back. So I have the front headlock position. I'm going to wrap the anaconda and roll through. And there she slides over the back, she gets the hooks in, and now she can start threatening the choke. And with her hip dexterity, she probably found it a lot easier than I did. I cannot emphasize enough how difficult these transitions are, and it really shows how much of a high-level grappler Cynthia Calvillo is. This is a fight of two ranges. Joanne Calderwood wants to keep it on the feet so she can kickbox, but if Calvillo can get it into her range, she can cause her all kinds of problems.
I love the way how these women are really testing the grappling skills and striking skills of Dan Hardy. Brilliant stuff. So, Nick, UFC President Dana White is really getting behind Calvillo. What do you think he's seeing and hearing?
Well, she's a finisher, and she looks the part. And she's part of this new generation of young superstars coming out of Team Alpha Male. You know, they seem to have them in abundance right now, and she's just one of many. But she's a fight finisher, John, and I think that's the key thing. And I think that's why a lot of fans are building momentum behind her as well. She doesn't stick around in there. She doesn't play to the judges. She goes in there to grab necks and finish fights. And that's obviously why Dana's attracted to it as well.
Yeah, and I think she's appeared on some really big cards as well, so she's not afraid of the bright lights.
Not at all. 2 pay-per-views so far,
Right.
and now a co-main event outside of her own country. So, you know, she's getting the stage to really shine, and the pressure's really on JoJo to stop her.
Yeah, enemy soil for this one. Excellent. So, Dan, Joanne Calderwood is a brilliant fighter, but maybe needs some consistency of results. What does she need to do to get there?
Well, she's got to focus on the things that she's good at. And the best thing is that she's moving around some of the best gyms in the world. Obviously, she's out in Iceland with Gunnar Nelson. She's been working at TriStar as well. So they're two teams that will really tighten her game and focus on the things that she's very good at. There's still plenty of time. She's still very young. There's still time for her to evolve and work on her wrestling and her ground game. But at this point in her career, she wins fights with strikes. So she has to keep it in that range.
On JoJo still, when she appeared in Glasgow last time round, she was so buoyed by the crowd on that night. They're going to really play a big factor in this one again for her, I think.
Yeah, they are, and I think she's going to need them. You know, I think this is going to be a tough fight for her. I think Cynthia arrives real with her tail up and with real momentum behind her. I think JoJo is still trying to find her place in this sport. For me, she is still lacking in a few areas, but she's got to ride the crest of a wave, what the Scottish fans will bring to her, ride that emotion into the octagon, keep the fight at range, stay nice and sharp, and let some heavy leather go and really try and make a mark on Cynthia from the beginning of the fight.
Yeah, and make a mark on the rankings, Dan. Where do both of these women go with a win?
Well, you know, very much the same as the main event. You know, JoJo Calderwood is fighting for her position in the top 10, whereas Calvillo is in an opportunity to make a massive name for herself by beating JoJo, especially in a co-main event situation. You know, there can be a lot of eyes on this card. Everyone knows Jo Calderwood from the Ultimate Fighter. She's a real sweetheart. There's not a single person I've ever met that doesn't like her. So in order for Cynthia to come in and get a big win over her like that, it's a massive opportunity for her, and I think she's going to make the most of it. But JoJo, on the other hand, has a mass of Scottish fans behind her.
She does, and the styles match up. Grappler versus striker, and of course a great strawweight fight. Women in the co-main, love that. So we're going to take a quick break now, but there's still plenty more to come. In part 3, we head to Scotland and go inside the training camp of Stevie Ray as he prepares for his main card matchup with Paul Felder. And later in the show, fellow Scotsman Paul Craig calls in ahead of his light heavyweight clash with Kelley Roundtree. Welcome back to UFC Breakdown, where we are running down the main card for the upcoming fight night in Glasgow. And one man that will relish appearing in front of his fellow countryfolk is Scotland's own Stevie Ray. Winner of 7 of his last 8 performances inside the octagon, he is becoming a promising contender in the lightweight division. And he gets an opportunity to make a real statement at home in Glasgow as he faces the always dangerous and always game Paul Felder. So, Nick, this one is pure fire.
Oh, yes. This is fight of the night, John.
You reckon?
Yeah, this is my tip for fight of the night. Yeah, I think this one's got all the ingredients to come up with the goods. You know, I think Paul Felder, never in a bad fight, always turns up ready to brawl, loves a tear-up. And you've got Stevie Ray, who, let's face it, put together a fine body of work in the UFC right now. Ross Pearson, Joe Lauzon, these are all guys, fringe contenders. And if he can get a win over Paul Felder as well, surely top 10, a ranking in the top 10 is next up.
Yeah, a little Celtic clash as well.
Oh, yes.
We love that. So, Dan, remind us what these two fighters look like.
Well, you're right, definitely fight of the night potential. Stevie Ray, the quiet-spoken but always very effective lightweight. He's looked great since he stepped into the UFC. And look at this fight against Mafra. You've got to see how he's very controlled, very measured in his striking. He's got good footwork. He covers a lot of distance. But he's a very cerebral fighter. He knows how to break people down and pick them apart. And he's got a wicked counter right hook. You can see when that lands immediately, his opponent's legs were stolen away. And then as soon as he knows the fight's there to finish, he will charge forward. So if Paul Felder's looking for a fight, he's going to get it with Stevie Ray. This is something that's going to be really useful against an aggressive opponent. Look how he steps forward with his right foot, steps to the outside of his opponent's foot, which allows him to power his left hand straight down the centre and catch him clean on the chin. Even Lebu nodded on that one. He knew that was a good punch to take. And you've got to think, if Paul Felder's constantly marching forward, it will be easy for Stevie Ray to find his way on the outside. And if he needs to brawl, he will do. He doesn't mind standing in the pocket. He walks forward and switches stance constantly in order to throw more and more power shots. Against Ross Pearson, it was a more controlled performance against someone who's very aggressive by nature. But we saw a lot of different kicking ability coming out of him there, and some takedowns as well. He's got good ground and pound if he needs it. He can wrestle. Beautiful big Matt Hughes slam to the floor there. And in his fight against Marcin Bandel, this was a short-notice performance. He shut down the submission offensive of a very dangerous Polish fighter and was able to ground and pound him to get the finish. So no matter where the fight goes, Stevie Ray is going to be putting it on his opponent. But he's slightly more controlled than his opponent here in Paul Felder, who, as you can see from there, is a ferocious competitor. And you'll see in every one of his fights, he's got that constant forward pressure. But this is the thing that really made him the name against the fan favourite Danny Castillo. A beautiful spinning technique here. Stiffened him, put him completely unconscious on the floor. And Paul Felder, you can see how excited he is from that win. This means so much to him. There's so much energy and emotion goes into this, and it transfers when he gets his hands on his opponents. He's aggressive in the clinch. He lands really powerful elbows and knees. And this was a nice trick as well I saw him using. So on the back against Darren Cruikshank, we'll see it in the replay here. He's pressuring down on the back of his head. Almost like when you're trying to set an opponent up to buy a technique so you open up a target. He's doing the same thing here. He's pushing down on his head, so the natural reaction of Darren Cruikshank, whose posture's been broken, is to drive his head up. As his head comes up, it lifts his chin and opens up the opportunity for that rear naked choke. So although he is an aggressive fighter, and although he does push forward and walk his opponents down, there is a thought process behind it. He is looking for those opportunities to capitalise. But the thing I love about Paul Felder, and the thing that most other people love, is when he gets hit, he throws his hands down and he marches forward. He's almost like one of those kind of fighters that when you hit him, he absorbs some of your power. It strengthens him. And this is why people like him so much. And against Stevie Ray, he's going to be constantly walking forward and keeping that pressure on him. I mean, look at this. Beautiful work against Ross Pearson. Constantly moving forward. Even when he takes a kick, bang, kick to the face, marches forward. And the more he gets hit, the more aggressive he gets, and the more reckless he gets, which is when he gets dangerous. Because when he gets reckless, he throws hard. And when he throws hard, he knocks people out. Look at this. Beautiful. Hands down, marches forward. It's exactly what we want to see in this fight. It's going to be a real good scrap.
And that elbow that Felder threw against Ricci in his last fight was one of my favourite elbows that I've ever seen thrown inside the octagon. I'm super excited about this one. So Stevie Ray is training just outside of Glasgow at higher level MMA. We caught up with the man that they call Braveheart as he prepares to take on Felder.
UFC Glasgow in 2015 was one of the best experiences of my life.
Born and raised in Fife, Scotland. What a moment for Stevie Ray.
The crowd, the whole experience was something that will live with me the rest of my life.
Just firing away is Braveheart. That's going to be it. Here it is all over. Stevie Ray by knockout.
Performance of the night, an extra 50 G's in the bank. I'll just be going out there to try and repeat that again. Yeah, I've done some camps at TriStar. I'm open-minded, so I wanted to go and train somewhere else and see what it was like. But I came home, I had a quick turnaround fight against Ross Pearson, so I just done my camp at home and then done the same with Lizon. And I felt good just doing my whole camp at home. So yeah, didn't change something that's not broken. We've been known as one of the best gyms in the UK for years.
I think style-wise, Paul Felder's quite an easy guy for us to prepare for, just because we have a lot of very good strikers here. 5, let's go! We've brought in some guys from outside this time. We brought in a couple of European champions and a world champion Thai boxer. And he's done close to 50 rounds with these guys over the last month.
Felder's more a striker. He's kind of got a Thai boxing style. A little bit of a brawler as well. He's like got that brawl in him where he likes to swing for the fences and everything he throws is power. I would say I'm going to be faster than him. If it's not working on the feet and I want to take it down, then I'll take him down.
Good hip control there. Nice. Kick him away, There you go. Break him down there.
A lot of people are saying that's the fight they're looking forward to because it's potentially fight of the night. I come to bang, Paul comes to bang. I feel confident in my striking, my wrestling, my jiu-jitsu, and it's just about going in there and do what I do and get the win.
Nice.
I've been doing MMA for like 8 years now, and it's only just beginning. 27 years old, and I just feel like I'm getting better and better.
Just give me someone to punch now.
Kind of flown under the radar a bit. This is why I'm looking at this fight. It's not just a fight.
There you go.
This is all to do with my future. To get paid better, to get the top 15, and to let everybody know who I am. I'm the real deal, and I'm a contender.
Drive the legs, keep low. Keep working, Stevie, keep working. This is where it counts. Why are we doing this?
So I can go and smash Paul Felder. All the training's done. I couldn't have done any more, so now it's just about going out, having a good time, embracing it all, getting the win, and then saying, you know, this is who I am. I'm coming for the belt.
Nice insight into the camp of Stevie Ray. So, Nick, Stevie Ray really wants a performance bonus out of this fight. Do you think it's the kind of matchup that could produce it?
I really do, yeah. I think it could produce it for both of them, to be honest with you. I think this fight's, for me, I think it's going to go the distance, but it's going to be an absolute battle. Stevie obviously goes into this fight with a lot on the line as well. It's, you know, apparently he's refused his latest contract. He wants to go into this fight with his contract deal up in the air a little bit. He believes that a big win here puts him in a greater bargaining position with the UFC. So it's a phenomenal position for him to be in, but it's a bit of a risk as well. So maybe that'll bring out the best in Stevie Ray.
OK, but he could be on the end of a performance bonus by Paul Felder, who continues to sharpen his toolkit at Rufus Sports. I think he's spending time with Mark Henry as well and some other coaches. Loved his last performance. Looks like he's in a really good spot to come into enemy territory.
You know, he just gets better every time we see him. And the thing with Paul Felder is because of his attitude and because of his gameness when he comes into the octagon, anything that you show him, he's going to try it out. You know, we see a lot of spinning techniques from him. We see a lot of, like that smash elbow that we were talking about against Ricci. They're techniques that most people wouldn't have the confidence to use because they've not been tested in the gym, because it's difficult to train elbows in the gym. So to step into the octagon and to have the confidence to try them just kind of shows you where his mind's at.
Yeah, Felder and Joanne Calderwood bringing the elbows. I love that. It could be quite nasty in there. Have you heard Felder talk about not wanting to be involved in these wars? I think he realises that, you know, yes, his fights are exciting, but he's taking a lot of damage. And I think that's why he's gone to Rufus Sport to work on some more defensive stuff. Is that going to take the edge off of his performance, do you think?
I think in his heart of hearts, he's a fighter, though, isn't he? He's a brawler. Right. I think he can do as much planned, as much tactical work as he likes, but when it comes down to it, once them knuckles start getting thrown about, he will revert to type, I'm sure. Don't forget Paul Felder. We first heard about this guy as a training partner for Cowboy Cerrone. This is a guy that would go and happily let Cowboy beat him up on a daily basis, and it was Cowboy that pretty much said, you've got to get this guy in the UFC. He's super entertaining, super durable, and I think he always will be. I appreciate the fact he's going and trying to round his game a little bit more now and fight a bit more intelligently, if you like, but as Dan knows, once them gloves land on the chin, you revert to type, of course. The line comes down, doesn't it, you know, so.
Is there a fear that Stevie Ray could be on the end of a striking masterclass from Felder, or do you think that he actually has all the tools and, of course, the addition of wrestling, which we've known Stevie Ray to use very well?
Well, I think if anything's going to cause Stevie problems, it's going to be the aggressiveness and that push-forward style of Felder. But interestingly, what he said in the video is that he feels like he's got a speed advantage, which means that, to me, it tells me that he's approaching this in a more cerebral way. He's not going in there to just bang knuckles and see who falls over first. If he feels like he's the faster fighter, then he's going to try that first. If it doesn't work out, he's obviously got the opportunity to take it down as well, which was another thing you mentioned. So it might be the case of the smarter fighter walks away with the win and neither of them walk away with the bonus. You know, it might be that kind of fight, but like you said, you know, when knuckles start getting thrown, these guys like to throw down, and both of these guys are going to be in there for the bonus as well.
I think Stevie's maturing really well now, though. I think those wins, especially over Ross Pearson in the Battle of Britain, and then over someone like Joe Lauzon, who's been around for so long.
His efforts,
I think in Stevie's mind now, he's not questioning if he belongs in the UFC. He's now starting to believe he can succeed and do really well in the UFC. And I think a big performance against Felder here, again, I think that pushes him towards a top 10 shot, for sure.
Yeah, he was so frustrated against Alan Patrick. It was a slow fight for him. He was really smothered there. So these are exactly...
He won't have that against Felder.
No, he loves these kinds of fights, and we love it too. Time now for a quick break. When we return, Paul Craig joins us from his training camp in Sweden to discuss his upcoming fight against Kelley Roundtree. Welcome back to UFC Breakdown. So, UFC Fight Night Glasgow is the flavour of the day. And one of the Scotsmen that will be appearing on the main card is Paul Craig. He joins us now from his training camp in Sweden. Paul Craig, welcome to UFC Breakdown. How are you, sir?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on.
So tell us why you've decided to go over to All Stars for this training camp.
We've done a fight camp in the UK in the past, and it's worked for us. So we were just looking to get like one final week of just some hard sparring. And where else in the world are you going to go apart from All Stars? You know, you've got three of the top light heavyweights in my division. You know, we've got Latifi, we've got Alexander, and we've got Jimmy. So that was our reason. So both myself and my coach came over, and it's been we've been welcomed with open arms. This is our second time here during this fight camp.
Well, sticking with that, Paul, obviously in that gym, like you said, you've got three of the best light heavyweights in the world. You can probably see the gap in talent between the top sort of 4 or 5 guys and then the rest of the division. So as a new light heavyweight to the division, what do you have to do to bridge that gap and make it to that top 5?
Yeah, that gap isn't as big as like I first expect. When I watch these guys on TV, I see superstars, and I don't believe I'm there yet. But when I train with these guys, I feel like there's not a massive gap between us, and it's just going to be more hard work, more dedication in my sport. That's all it is.
Paul, looking back to your UFC debut in Sacramento, incredible experience. You won the $50,000 bonus. I spoke to Brian, your coach, shortly afterwards, and he told me you hardly bat an eyelid when you found out you won the bonus, because for you it's all about the journey you're on. Looking back on that performance now, what's your take from it?
We went away and we looked at my performance and we weren't happy with some of the stuff we were doing. You know, chin coming high, footwork wasn't the best. You know, I'm not going to lie to you and say I'm a striker. I'm a grappler. So that's where we went away and started working on that. And then when we fought in 209 Las Vegas, we weren't 100%. And we didn't follow our plan to the best of our ability, and that's where we went a bit off. But Sacramento, man, we were riding high. Our sail was full of wind after that.
So, Paul, you've obviously taken some lessons from your last fight then, and now you've got Kelley Roundtree, a really strong opponent. You're also fighting at home in Glasgow. Firstly, tell us about Khalil as an opponent for you, and then what more motivation you're going to get from your fellow Scots people.
Khalil, we know he's a powerful striker. We've seen his knockouts in the Ultimate Fighter, we know the body kicks. We know he's explosive. Everybody in our division has power in their hands, regardless of what size you are, what frame you are. Everybody, if you get caught with a flush punch, you're going down. So all our game plan is to stop that from happening and punch him more times than he punches us. With regards to fighting in my hometown, you know what it's like yourself, both everybody in this sport. It's hard travelling away. You know, you're not eating 100% your diet because you're not in the house cooking your dinner. You're missing your family, you're missing your friends, you're missing your normal routines. For me, I'm not going to miss any of that kind of stuff because I'm going to be in my hometown. You know, I'm going to sleep in my bed at night, the night before my fight, spend some time with my family, and then drive into Glasgow to fight on the biggest show in my life. It's stuff that dreams come true. It sounds a bit cheesy, doesn't it? Like, dreams can come true only if you believe. But it's mental. Like, 2015 was the last time they were in the UK. They were in Scotland, and I was in the crowd as a fan. So that's mental to think that.
Where are you now, Paul? Where are you now? Talk about the room that you're in, because obviously you're in Sweden. You're away from home at the moment. That seems like quite a cosy setup you've got there.
It's very cosy. It's the best way to describe it is like a 4-star jail cell. I don't have a window. I've got a mirror, which is like, I don't know where they get this thing from. Look at the neck of this. I'm living out a suitcase. You know, when you had called us, we were away washing our clothes. So it's mental that Sweden's crazy, but it's a lovely place. Not very unlike Glasgow, walking about the streets, but we knew we needed to come here. So we're sacrificing this box. You want me to do a quick sweep, or will it mess up the camera?
And you're fitting perfectly with your Viking beard that you've got going on as well.
Look at this telly. Who's listening to the telly that big? See if I had to fall. If that had to fall in me right now, I wouldn't have to fight in UFC Glasgow, man. I'm in intensive care if that thing falls.
And it's more like CCTV rather than entertainment TV as well, Paul. Last final one for you then. What are you seeing as you walk out then inside the SSE Hydro?
I'm seeing just waves of saltires, Scottish fans, and just see that noise. And then when you shut that octagon and the doors close, you can't see a single thing. All you can see is me and Khalil's tash. That's all I visualise, his tash. It's impressive, man.
Rousing words there from you, sir. Very nice indeed. We wish you all the best in your final moments of preparation. Can't wait to see you in Glasgow. It's great to hear from Paul. Sounds like he's in really good spirits, which after his loss to Pedro, he really wasn't. And I read an interview somewhere where he struggled to come to terms with that loss, but his camp identified what it was. Since then, he's been able to move on, and we heard that he's in good spirits and training with some very good people down at All Stars.
What a great gym for him to be at, you know, especially being a grappler and you know, self-confessed grappler that he's working on his striking. You look at the All Stars gym, and probably other than Latifi, the majority of the guys coming out there are kickboxers, as well as him being 6'4", working with Alexander Gustafsson and learning how to use that reach advantage that he's got. I think he's going to put him in good stead. You've got to think he came into the UFC with so much momentum as an unbeaten prospect. He picked up his first loss in the UFC, and that can sometimes set people back. It can shake that confidence that they have. So to regroup, to go to a gym like All Stars, he's going to rebuild that.
How big a prospect do you think he is then?
I think he has all the potential in the world. He's got the physical size for light heavyweight, which is the first thing we have to talk about, because these light heavyweights, ever since John Jones, are getting bigger and bigger. He's got the grappling skills, we know that. We know he's got the toughness, and he's got that marketability. He's very good at speaking. He's got a big following as well in his hometown, home country. So I think all he needs to do is continue to round out his game. And like I said, I think at All Stars, that's the right place for him to be. I
haven't spoken to him a few times as well. It's like, yeah, he's got a big following in Scotland at the moment, but for me, this is a guy the whole of the UK can get behind, because not only does he finish fights, but he can really talk and really sell himself as well. He's got some personality. He's got a real identity with the whole beard thing and everything else, and the nickname. You know, there's something people can really tangible that they can buy into. I think this kind of exposure for Paul Craig is only going to put him on a platform. I think once the UK fans get on the back of him and start following him, he could go a really long way.
Someone else that you've spoken to in the past is his opponent, Kelley Roundtree, and he's got a really interesting backstory.
Yeah, fascinating guy. This is a guy that not too long ago was 300-pound chain-smoking roadie, working for
That's unbelievable.
Working for bands in America, travelling around, and he was telling a story saying on Saturday nights after the live gigs, they'd always go and find a bar and they'd watch the UFC. So that's kind of like a routine thing. He said one night I was just kind of sitting there, I turned around to the band and said, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to go and fight in the UFC. And at the time, obviously, they all thought it was hilarious. 5-6 years later, the guy has shaved all that weight off, over 100 pounds. He's now fighting in the UFC, and he's now, you know, travelling over to Scotland to appear on main cards. It's a phenomenal story.
Yeah, quite some story. But Dan, how does he get it done in Scotland against the crowd and, of course, their favourite fighting son, or one of their favourite fighting sons?
Yeah, well, the first round's going to be difficult because, you know, managing those emotions is going to be the first challenge for him, especially because, you know, since The Ultimate Fighter, this has really been the first time he's going to have a lot of eyes on him. You know, people are really paying attention to this, particularly because he's fighting Paul Craig. So in order to win the fight, I've really got to feel like he has to kind of hold himself back a little bit. We know he's got that 0 to 60. We know he's got that explosive power, and he can find ways to hurt people. But if he gets too drawn in, he can find himself on the floor being smothered like he did in the Ultimate Fighter finale, where he just gets frustrated, constantly trying to get back to his feet, while Paul Craig, you know, works on him on the ground and looks for that submission.
Yes, a nice light heavyweight fight. Really looking forward to that. 4 Scottish fighters on this card this time around, just showing the real groundswell of enthusiasm and talent coming out of that part of the world, and a host of other European prospects as well. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your insights and expertise. Thank you to you guys at home for watching. If you want to find out where you can watch UFC Fight Night Glasgow in your territory, go visit UFC.com for that. And keep the conversation going. You can hit us up at UFC Europe using the hashtag UFC Glasgow. Thank you once again for watching, and we'll see you next time.